Is it biologically natural for us to be faithful to one mate all our lives? Or is it society that pushes us in that direction? Are we, by nature, monogamous or polygamous? When a survey of nearly 200 different tribal societies was made, it was discovered that in most of them, a man was allowed to have more than one wife. But interestingly, in most of them, he only chose to have a single wife. So even when we have the freedom to be polygamous, we remain essentially a monogamous species. So how do you explain those special men who have been defiantly polygamous on a grand scale? The answer is power, the power that enables them to control and support a huge number of wives. And no man in the whole history of the world was more powerful than the great pharaoh of ancient Egypt, Ramesses II. Like so many other polygamists, he had one special favourite, his very first queen, Nefertari, who's usually shown standing faithfully by his right knee, dwarfed by his vast image. He had an impressive collection of queens and concubines, but it was Nefertari that he adored. And nearby, there's a temple that Ramses had built specially for her, where uniquely she's shown on the same huge scale as her husband. She was his true wife. All the others were little more than status symbols or diplomatic liaisons. But of course, all this happened over 3,000 years ago. What of today? Where are the harem masters of modern times? This is Mongo Faya of Cameroon in West Africa. And these are some of his 58 wives who together have already given him over 40 children. If other men have bedroom eyes, it could be said that Mongo Faya has dormitory eyes. After one wedding, when he married 6 women on the same day, it was predicted that he'd continue to add to his family until he had over 100 wives. In his patriarchal role, he's treated with great respect and frequently holds court to admire his wives and judge their dancing skills. How, you may well ask, can one man afford to care for such a large group of women? The answer is as unexpected as Mongo himself, for Mongo Faya is a local pop star, one of the most famous in all Cameroon. It's a safe bet that Mongo Faya is the only pop star in the world who is married to his entire backing group. Mongo has declared himself ruler of the kingdom of Akumba. Significantly, Akumba is the name of his first, much-loved wife, who was killed in a road accident. So, like Ramses II, Mongo may have had many wives, but one he loved above all others. So Mongo Faya seems to have made polygamy work well enough for him. Everyone seems extremely cheerful. Well, almost everyone, because although he's been married 80 times, he has also been divorced 22 times. So perhaps there is a slight instability in the system somewhere. This thought is underlined by what happened here. This is the famous Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. And it was here for centuries that the great sultans kept their harem. The harem was a building which housed all their women, the concubines and the wives, the women who were there to give them sons. They were pampered and protected, looked after by eunuchs, isolated from the rest of the world, kept in the lap of luxury. It all sounds a very happy arrangement, but it wasn't quite like that. What started out as a way of giving the sultans their sons and heirs eventually descended into a massive status display, and from that went further downhill until it became really something of a nightmare. Inside this amazing warren of buildings, there were intense jealousies and murders. Any wives who caused displeasure were executed. The executions were carried out on the dark waters of the Bosphorus. A large sack was weighted with stones, and then the unfortunate wife placed inside it. It was tied tight and put in a small execution boat, which was towed out here and capsized. On one occasion, a particular sultan ordered all 300 of his wives to be drowned in this manner, so that he could enjoy the fun of restocking his palace with fresh faces. So I think it's safe to say that polygamy on a grand scale does have its weaknesses. But perhaps on a more modest scale, there might be a better chance of success. In Utah, in the United States, where some breakaway religious groups favour plural marriages, there are usually only a few wives in each family. And on the surface, all is peace and light. The overall atmosphere is one of restraint and quiet reserve, as though any flirting or frivolity might quickly break the calm. In other words, polygamy works here, but at a price. The price being the need to keep the emotions and the sexuality well damped down to avoid jealousies. It's as though polygamy is essentially an imposed regime, one that can be made to work, but which is under constant threat from mankind's more basic monogamous urges that see couples falling hopelessly in love and becoming jealously exclusive in their intimacy. When couples fall in love, the power of their emotions leads them to seek out some kind of symbolic gesture. Since they're declaring undying love for one another, the obvious gesture is one that involves something with no end in sight, a ring.
What do you think?
I definitely like that one.
Yeah? Well, I'm sold on it.
That's the only thing that matters.
Mm. Well, we're going to have to think, because if it's any more than what I've got in my pocket, then I'm going to have to go to the bank anyway. So
take your time. Believe me, you're going to look at it, as I say, every day, the rest of your life. You want it to be perfect. And, you know, I don't want you to have any sort of doubts at all. You love it, don't you?
Yes.
Yes, I know you do. I know.
And you're not going to move on that price, I take it?
I can't. They're not cheap. I'm not trying to tell you they're cheap.
I think you've got a bit too much experience for me. You know full well that we're going to buy the bloody thing.
I know you're going to buy the ring. Yeah, yeah. But shall I tell you why? Because it's right for me. Go for it? Or do you want to?
Sold.
Done. Thank you.
What do you want to do? Get something to eat?
I'm not hungry. In fact, I feel rather ill.
The same symbolism can be observed on a more dramatic scale at a strange landmark in Estonia in northeastern Europe. When a meteor struck the Earth at this spot, a small lake appeared inside the crater that it formed. Because, like a wedding ring, the rim of the crater is circular and has no end, it too has become a symbol of eternity. When they're married, an Estonian bride and groom, accompanied by their wedding guests, walk ceremonially around the crater to ensure that their newly blessed love will last forever. Formal marriage arrangements are found all over the world. But if we're really a species programmed to fall in love and form monogamous pairs, why has society felt it necessary to turn this natural instinct into a legally binding contractual agreement? The answer is that the pair bond is not as invincible as it may seem. This same Estonian couple, at the reception that follows their gesture of eternal love, proceed to cast doubt on their vows of fidelity. This local tradition isn't meant to be taken too seriously, of course, but it's significant that it occurs even in jest. The bride is given a large dice to roll, and tradition has it that the number she throws will indicate how many years it will be before she takes a lover. Then the groom throws, only in his case, the number represents not years, but months. Everywhere, people are obsessed with the idea that their romantic attachments should become permanent. In the early stages of a relationship, to even suggest that this may not happen is considered insulting. So this Estonian dice throwing is something of an oddity. And yet everyone knows that in many cases, intense love doesn't last, and will before long start to weaken, especially under the pressures of modern living. Occasionally, special precautions are taken against this. Prenuptial agreements are drawn up. But their very existence somehow blights the great moment of supposedly total commitment. In some cultures, as here among the Yemen, a more practical approach is adopted. A kind of insurance policy is taken out by the bride. This young wife is deliberately spending her bride price so that should her marriage fail, she'll have personal belongings that can't be taken away from her. Typically, she buys gold and jewellery, which is of no use to her husband, and which she can store away in a special treasure box. Then, should he eventually decide to divorce her, she will at least have some degree of security. Sadly, she has good reason to take such precautions. This is a divorce court in the Yemen, where she may one day find herself. All over the world, pair bonds are collapsing. Husbands and wives are separating. The pressures of modern living are making it more and more difficult for couples to retain the harmony of their early days together. In some European countries, for example, 4 out of 10 marriages will flounder. In North America, the figure is even higher. In the United States, divorce is now so common that for every 2 couples who get married and declare undying love for one another, 1 couple, sadly, will divorce. Now, there's so many divorces that this is creating a problem for the legal profession. They're getting clogged up with the paperwork. But this machine has come to the rescue. This is called Quick Court, and it's a kiosk which is installed in places like public libraries so that people can use this machine to get their divorce papers instead of having to go through the complicated and confusing business of visiting a lawyer's office. This is how the machine works. First of all, you choose the language. We'll have English. And then a screen comes up and a friendly judge comes and explains everything to you. We'll bypass him and move on to the next stage. And I want to file for divorce. Actually, I'm very happily married, but I'm just going through the motions here. I hope I don't get divorced as a result of all this. Now, the next stage will appear on the screen. And here we are. Now, it tells you that it'll accept all major credit cards. And of course, one of the advantages of this is that it is very inexpensive. People who haven't got much money and who can't afford to go to lawyers, to attorneys, they can use this machine, and it only costs them $30 to get all the divorce papers filled in. Is your marriage irretrievably broken down? Are you absolutely certain that the marriage can't be saved? If you're certain of that, you press yes. That question has to be asked. That's the formal question. Now we want to fill out the forms. And then the forms will come up, and you go on filling in all the information in a very simple way, and at the end of all of that, you have divorce papers coming out of this slot here, papers like this, all filled in, and then you can take these off to the court and file for divorce. For most people, the breakdown of a marriage is a very sad moment, and it leaves many haunting memories. Usually all people want to do at times like this is to try and forget the past and concentrate on the future. And now there's even a service to help with that. If you have a favourite photograph of yourself that awkwardly happens to include the ex-beloved, you can have him or her magically removed. It's the computer-age way of rewriting history and conveniently ridding yourself of unhappy memories. But why should so many marriages break down? After all those words of undying eternal love, what goes wrong? The single most common reason cited by couples seeking divorce is adultery. And part of the problem seems to be the incessantly roving eye of the human male. Almost every day of his adult life, every married male commits adultery. He may only do it with his eyes, but every time he sees an attractive young woman, he stares at her in an unmistakable way, contemplating what it would be like to make love to her. He's not interested in setting up a new pair bond, merely in scattering his genetic material as widely as possible. Of course, a whole industry has arisen to cater for this masculine urge. It's the industry of prostitution. This narrow alleyway, now more or less deserted, was once notorious throughout the whole of the Mediterranean. Its official name is Straight Street, but to every sailor in the world it was known simply as the Gut. When the fleet arrived at Malta's Grand Harbour, just over there, each sailor would hail a dicer, that's a little water taxi, travel across the harbour and make a beeline for this place. From top to bottom, it was full of brightly lit bars. And it was here that the sailors came for what was euphemistically called rest and recreation. Now, the liaisons that occurred with the many girls who were here were very brief. But the sailors ignored the fact that they were emotionally inadequate encounters, and they ignored the health risks because the urge for sexual activity was so intense. So they took these risks. Very few of these encounters would ever lead to anything in the way of a permanent relationship, of course, because the fleet was about to move on. But the men came nevertheless, and it's been the same ever since villages turned into towns and towns turned into cities. This is another great Mediterranean port, the city of Ephesus in western Turkey. It flourished here as a major Mediterranean port over 2,000 years ago, but then the harbour silted up and it was abandoned. But the ruins are still here to tell us what life was like. And behind me there's a magnificent facade of one of the buildings right here in the city centre. This is the main street. And it's rather surprising that just on my left there is a different kind of building. This one was the city brothel. It wasn't tucked away, it was put right here in the centre of the city. And the sailors used to come up from the port and visit the girls who lived just in here. And this is one of the rooms in the ancient brothel. They've called prostitution the oldest profession, and standing here, that seems rather appropriate. It's clearly a well-appointed building. There's a water channel here to collect fresh water in that well. And the rooms are quite cosy. There are a lot of them. It was clearly an important building. If you doubt me when I say it's a brothel, well, I can prove it because just outside on the road, there's an engraved slab which I think must be the oldest brothel sign in the entire world. And here it is. Over here, there's a girl's face. She's wearing a very fancy hat. And here's a footprint pointing in the direction of the brothel, telling you which way to go. And on this side of the slab, there is a pubic triangle, which leaves you no doubt at all about what is available just a little further down the road. Now, in addition to this brothel sign, there's also kept over in the local museum a little priapic figure which was found in the well inside the brothel. And the condition of this little man leaves you in no doubt at all about what was taking place inside that building over 2,000 years ago. Of course, prostitution still flourishes everywhere today. In a few places, such as here in Nevada, it's been made legal. A recent survey revealed that the majority of men who visit prostitutes are married, and 3/4 of them claimed that their visits actually helped their marriages. Why this may be true is because here there's no risk of forming a new pair bond that will compete with the existing one. So, assuming that safe sex is practiced and there are no health risks, a visit to a prostitute may actually be safer than starting an affair.
Hi.
Hi.
You want to come with me?
You bet.
Just have a seat. Hi.
Hi.
So, what are we going to do here? You've never been here before?
I've never been here before.
Okay, we've got prices that start at, $80, and they just go up from there. The more activity you want, the more expensive it gets.
Do you take, like, Visa or MasterCard?
Yes, Visa, MasterCard, traveler's checks, and cash.
How about if, say, we want to soak in a jacuzzi and, say, spend about an hour together?
Okay, did you want sex, intercourse?
Oh, yeah, that would be nice.
Okay, if you want to do that, I can give you a massage and stuff. Really relax you. Spend about $1,000. Is that okay with you?
$1,000.
Uh-huh.
Well, I don't quite have $1,000.
Well, what do you have? Why don't you tell me what you
What are we looking like
have?
about the $100 range?
$100 range? I'll give you a bath.
Well, there must be a pretty good bath for $100.
Despite the fact that prostitutes may be serving a valuable social function by providing sexual outlets for males who might otherwise embark on more damaging affairs, the professional girls involved have always been treated shabbily by officialdom and pushed to the fringes of society. The reason is not hard to find. Much of the male activity here is secretive and, if discovered, may lead to feelings of betrayal that can have a devastating effect on the family pair bond. Because of this, it's doubtful if prostitution will ever become fully integrated into polite society. Many loving couples find that one way to keep their pair bond strong is to pander to the need for sexual variety, but without turning to new partners. In other words, they are, as it were, unfaithful to one another with one another. Here in Japan, there are special establishments where this is made easy. The famous love hotels, where couples can come for an evening's erotic entertainment in exotic circumstances. They remain faithful to one another, but at the same time indulge their most outlandish fantasies. Earlier cultures have often recognized this need for intense sexual fulfillment, realizing that for human beings, sexual behavior is more than merely procreative. It also serves the important role of keeping the loving couple happily together. It helps to cement the pair bond, and everywhere in the ancient world there's evidence that human sexuality was warmly celebrated. This early temple in India is literally covered in every conceivable sexual posture known to man, and I use the word conceivable advisedly. Mankind has always been obsessed with sex. I once described the human animal as the sexiest primate alive, and I wasn't being sensational. I was merely being objectively accurate. And it's important to realize that this applies to the human female as much as to the male.
I've got $20. Give me 21. I hear he's real good with dogs. $40. I got $40. Do I hear 45? I got $42.
All too often, the human female has been told that she should be sexually passive. But happily, this idea is now being widely challenged. Here in the remote town of Talkeetna in Alaska, it's the females who are taking charge of proceedings and placing their bids in a bachelor auction, with the men in question being offered up like sex slaves for a night of pleasure.
I sold them. They came with money, thank God. I got 85 back here. I got 85 in the back. He's worth it, believe me. It's an adventure with grog. Just a dance and a beer is worth it with grog. I've got 85 back there. Do I hear 90? I got 90 up here. I've got $90 up here. $100 right here. I've got $100 for a good cause. I sold him to you $100.
If women are biologically so sexually active, then what about the third possible pattern of love? One woman with several husbands, the state that's called polyandry. The fact is that this is extremely rare. In a study of 849 different cultures, it was discovered in only 4 of them. The most striking examples come from India. There, certain tribes do engage in polyandry, but only in a very special way. What usually happens is that when a man gets married, his wife also becomes the spouse of all his brothers. For the wife, this can mean heavy household duties, and she doesn't even get to choose her husbands. For the men, it means never being sure which is the father of the children. So its unpopularity is not surprising. And there's the difficult question of knowing whether at any particular moment the shared wife is entertaining one of the other husbands. The solution is for each husband to leave his personal calling card in the shape of his walking stick on a rope outside her hut whenever he pays her a conjugal visit, rather like an occupied sign on a toilet door. So, to sum up, the basic human breeding system of monogamy has 3 variations. Adultery, the secret addition of extra partners; polygyny, the official addition of extra females; and polyandry, the official addition of extra males. Each has its own difficulties and problems, but these can be avoided by another, rather drastic alternative. That is, giving up breeding altogether. You can take a vow of celibacy. Centuries ago, for example, you could become a pious knight and set off on the Crusades. These are the present-day representatives of the knights who, 9 centuries ago, set off to destroy the infidel and offer aid to Christian pilgrims. It was a holy crusade, of course, so they had to swear an oath of celibacy. They were European aristocrats who created the ideal of chivalry, and their vow of celibacy removed them from the distractions of family life and helped to focus them single-mindedly on their task. A similar single-mindedness is found among monks and nuns all over the world. A preoccupation with the afterlife compensates them for their loss of both family and sexuality in this life, or so it would appear. In their cloistered communities, it's hard to imagine what really happens to their biological urges. One can only guess that somehow they manage to sublimate them by transforming them into sacred experiences and religious ecstasies. For nuns, it's possible to experience an emotional substitute for married life. They can undergo a ritual that marries them to Christ. As brides of Christ, they may then be able to feel themselves in a spiritual form of pair bond, which may go some way to satisfy their deep-seated biological urge to set up a family unit. By then engaging in nurturing, caring activities of various kinds, they can also find an outlet for their maternal urges. For them, all God's children become their children and need to be protected, healed, and fed.
Tercer misterio, la venida del Espíritu Santo. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santo.
This is the Salvador Dali Museum in Figueres in northeastern Spain. Salvador Dali, the famous Spanish artist, and his wife Gala had a very strange sexual relationship. They were very remote from one another. He lived in his house on the sea, she lived in an inland castle, and occasionally one would go to the other. In fact, in their later lives, the most intimate moment they shared, really, was when he drove her in his Cadillac around the grounds of her castle, but that was just after she had died. Now, bearing in mind their strange sexual relationship, it's not surprising that when Dali invented what he called his own personal perversion, it too lacked intimacy. He called it cledalism, and in it, the man and woman were able to reach simultaneous orgasm without touching one another. In fact, they could even be in a separate room. Now, all this is very odd to us today, and yet many human beings in modern times have lived adult sex lives in which there's very little physical contact with other people. Increasingly, we're seeing solitary sex. The ultimate form of solitary sex is now available via the internet. Interactive sex with a distant partner is possible through the magic of the computer. Salvador Dali would have relished this as a modern form of cledalism. A man calls up a woman who's sitting alone in a room on the other side of the world, in this case 6,000 miles away. She appears on his screen and then responds to whatever request he taps onto his keyboard. Solitary sex has many advantages. It avoids domestic fighting. It avoids messy divorce proceedings, unwanted pregnancies, pious frustrations, and of course, it avoids AIDS. It's little wonder that it's becoming increasingly popular. All that's missing is intimacy and love.
Hello. Hi, is this John? How much more do you want to see? Lots more? I don't want to burn out your monitor. I want to make sure you're having a real good time. Oh, is your boss walking in? Oh, that's awful. Will you call me again? Bye, John.
Sex can never become more remote than this. Unless, of course, solitary sex becomes solo sex, with a little help from a mass production line.
Stormtroopers.
Solitary sex may have its appeal for some, but the truth is that even today we remain an essentially pair-bonding species, programmed to fall in love and set up family units. Our modern lifestyle may make this difficult, but it remains our genetic heritage, and sooner or later most people are going to feel the urge to pair off. If in the crowded conditions of city life this is hard to achieve, then special measures may have to be taken to aid the process. This is a singles convention in the United States, where everyone present is seeking a mate and has come here specifically to find one.
What else could I do? It's hard. I just met you. It's very hard for me.
Boy meets girl should happen naturally, almost by accident, but if it doesn't, then events like this can come to the rescue.
Marty, here's one Adam.
Everyone fills in a form describing their personal details, and then they all eagerly await a response. It may seem like an artificial way to find a lifetime partner, but then living in a huge impersonal city is itself an artificial lifestyle for human beings whose ancient ancestors evolved in small tribal groups, where finding a mate was easy. Another kind of problem exists for those who live not in overcrowded cities, but scattered out thinly over vast areas. This is Finland, one of the largest countries in Europe, but with one of the smallest populations. In the icy landscapes close to the Arctic Circle, the population is so spread out that there's little chance of a casual meeting with the partner of your dreams. So again, something has to be done to help the pairing off process. The answer is the summer lavatansit, which may look like a simple local dance party, but which is in reality a serious mating ritual. Some of the people present will have driven over 100 miles to attend, and there's an urgency in the air. Men approach women and with barely a word exchanged, they start to dance, testing one another for any favourable reactions. Many of the men here are farmers, living in such isolated locations that women aren't too keen to join them on a permanent basis. But as with so many human beings, the overriding concern is to find a marriage partner and establish a family unit, no matter how difficult this might prove to be. For others, the net is cast even wider. Instead of a national search for a mate, the quest becomes global. The net becomes the internet. Computer marriage agencies are rapidly multiplying so that the lonely can now search the planet for compatible partners. Once the electronic search has succeeded, it becomes necessary to revert to a more old-fashioned form of travel and physically make the journey to the source of one's hopes. This aircraft, landing at Moscow's international airport, is carrying a group of male passengers, all with one thought on their minds: to find the perfect Russian mate. They've responded to one of the 20 or more Moscow marriage agencies that advertise on the internet. And they're now arriving to meet in person the young women whose images they have seen on their screens.
Be like a few roosters in a hen house.
Unable to find suitable marriage partners in their own country, these men have come to Russia with love in their hearts and the documents to prove it. A special event is organised at a large hotel where they can meet and interview their prospective brides. The young women are attractive, well-educated and eager to settle down and start a family.
Hi, my name is Alla. I came from Minsk, Belarus. I like to meet with a man who is kind, wise, and who would be able to be a reliable partner and devoted companion for life and marriage.
I hope that maybe I meet a man from America for some friendship or even for more close relation. I don't know. I hope so.
With the aid of an interpreter, the women move from man to man. They listen, ask questions, get to know the visitors, and then move on again.
This is inside the house.
At the end of this mass dating ritual, some will attempt to take the process further. Others will sadly find no one with whom they feel suited.
Why did you decide to choose a Russian woman, not American woman?
It's a nice question, yes.
I don't know. It seems like I'm 46 and I haven't been married yet. And I didn't seem to have much luck in America, so I thought I'd come here and try.
I see.
The American women just seem to want to be professional people and don't want to marry very much, I guess.
The fact is that there was no luck for you there.
There's no luck.
And as far as the Russians, they're quite different. Their first problem is husband, his job. Yes, and we like
house, children.
And house. We keep house. We take care of children, yes. And this is our job, this is our profession.
I'm just joking that you will go to Hollywood and you will make movies. I know what I'm saying, but I'm not sure if she's understanding what I'm saying. It's on my mind is I don't know when I'm going to lose her. I wanted to know if while she's here in Moscow, if sometime we can. Will she be here for a couple more days after Tuesday, Wednesday, those are like the free.
Such are the complexities of the modern mating game. But every one of these individuals has the same ultimate goal: to find a partner, settle down, and establish a family unit. The pair bond remains the most powerful of all the patterns of love. After contemplating all the different types of mateship system known to mankind, it's hard to see one that's perfect. But there can be no denying that biologically we're all programmed to fall in love and form pairs. These pairs are then the basis for future breeding, without which, of course, the species would soon disappear. Given all the difficulties we seem to encounter in faithfully following this simple system, it's fair to ask why evolution hasn't given us a 100% fully expressed urge to pair off, so that once we're mated, we remain so for the rest of our lives. Adding other forms of sexual activity to our lives is always going to be potentially disruptive and damaging to the family unit, so why do it? The answer is that to become completely fixated on one sexual partner would be biologically wasteful. If a young mate is killed, for example, his or her partner would then be condemned to a long life of sterility. The system has to retain a degree of flexibility to avoid this. Sometimes, however, the bonds of love for a partner are so immensely powerful that this doesn't happen, and young wives or husbands continue to mourn their departed loved ones long after all hope is lost. Some may never recover. For others, it may take years. Here at Kresty Prison in St. Petersburg in Russia, a poignant illustration of this type of human tragedy is being played out. Inside these ugly walls are men, many of whom have been condemned to die for the crimes they've committed. They're penned in 16 to a cell with only 4 beds, so they must take it in turn to sleep. In these inhuman conditions, they have only one thought: to see their loved ones for just one last time. To do this, they laboriously make small holes in their heavily shuttered windows and then somehow manage to peep down at the road outside, signalling frantically with their hands, hoping to get even the briefest of glimpses of their wives below. Their faithful wives come here day after day and stand by the side of the road, sending back visual signals of love to their condemned partners. Occasionally, a makeshift blowpipe is pushed through a window and a small paper message in the form of a rolled-up dart is blown down onto the street. The ingenuity of the human brain survives even in these appalling conditions. The dart is difficult to see. It appears as a small white speck. There. Dashing out into the busy traffic, the prisoner's wife manages to pick it up before it's damaged. What's happening here is ample proof of the intensity of the emotional attachments that exist between individual males and females. Here, there's no possibility of further family life, no possible future for husband and wife as a couple. The situation for these men and women is completely without hope. They'll never be together again, and yet the passion they feel for one another refuses to die. After the men have been executed and the years have passed, perhaps then their wives may find new partners. But in the meantime, the power of human love continues to express itself in this moving way. The human pairing system does have its weaknesses, but it also has its amazing strengths. Regardless of the obstacles that modern urban life throws at it, and until our species has either exterminated itself or has evolved onto a completely new plane, I suspect that this will always be so.